Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible in part by a grant from the Imlay Foundation.
If you come across this snake in the wild, don't run, just enjoy the sight. This is an indigo, the largest native snake in North America. He lives in Georgia, but they're in a bit of trouble. We'll tell you about that later. First, we want to introduce you to one tough little bird. Phil Spivey is out to save an endangered species. It is elusive and fast. It lives in a special kind of forest in an extraordinary nest that can take years to build. The red-cockaded woodpecker is extremely rare. Spivey spends days looking for their nests, and if he doesn't see enough of them, he just builds one. Spivey uses a power tool to carve out a spot that's just big enough for this box. It's designed like the typical nesting hole, but even with a chainsaw, getting it the right size is hard.
Well, I'm glad we're not in any hurry.
Frustration mounts as wood chips fly. Finally, a bird-worthy hole. He glues it in place and fills in the spaces with wood putty. But he has to think like a woodpecker. He scrapes the bark, like they would do. He paints it to match and adds white stripes to look like dripping resin. When he's done, it looks like a pretty cool bachelor pad.
And we heard a bird over here when we drove up, so I guarantee you within the next couple of days, he's gonna be in that cavity looking around, checking it out. Now maybe he can go find a girlfriend and finally settle down. There was just a single male here last year. So as far as I know, that's probably all that's here now. There's just one active cavity right over here. So maybe this one more newer, brand new, ready-made condo will be just what he wants.
Spivey may look like a tough lumberjack, but he has a soft spot for these little birds. He keeps track of every nest and the chicks within. The sound of woodpeckers tapping on trees resonates through the forest as Spivey, like some bird obstetrician, checks the images of babies hidden deep in the trunk of a pine. We met in the Silver Lake Wildlife Management Area near Bainbridge. Spivey invited us to tag along as he puts bands on baby birds. His truck is like a makeshift lab as he prepares to take birds from their nests. He uses this contraption to sort of lasso the chicks.
It goes around their entire bodies almost all the time, and you're able to pull them out.
Spivey is constantly making notes. Existing populations can disappear quickly.
I had one group that was ready to be banded that we probably could have banded today, and I went there Friday and there were flying squirrels in the cavity. So they had well, at least they killed the chicks or kicked them out anyway. That's definitely their biggest competitors are flying squirrels.
After locating chicks that are just the right age, He begins a process that inspires new respect for the life of a biologist. Spivey works alone on a ladder that he builds as he climbs. Once on top, he brings out the chicks one by one. And if you ever wondered what those blue Crown Royal bags are for, well, now you know. Spivey keeps that blue bag full of chicks close to his heart as he finishes up and climbs back down. You are about to get an insider look at the kind of research few people ever get to see. With eyes still closed and featherless wings flopping about, these tiny birds define the word helpless. Spivey works quickly. Each tiny chick is adorned with an exclusive bracelet that will allow researchers to follow it through adulthood.
They end up being very colorful little birds.
Doesn't it hurt them in any way when you put the bands on?
No, the bands just clip around the leg. There's no, out of the thousands and thousands of young nestling woodpeckers that have been banded, have extremely low mortality. So it doesn't seem to affect their ability to grow or to gather food once they're a little bit older. You know, their legs are almost as large as they're going to be anyway. And we size the bands very, very carefully to make sure that we are using the appropriate size band so there's enough room for the leg to grow. And we have thousands of adults with bands that seem to be doing just fine.
Every bird has a different color combination, which Spivey carefully records and will then share with other biologists. Phil, what are you doing now?
This is part of some genetic research from the University of Georgia. They have a graduate student that's looking at the genetics of red-cockaded woodpeckers. We've been moving these young birds around to different populations and starting new populations for about 10 years now. And one of the questions that has arisen is, are we doing the right thing by mixing all of these birds that are coming from multiple different populations? And so this is part of his research that's just starting this year.
As soon as the chicks are returned, an adult is quick to arrive with food, and we set out for the second nest. This time, we attached a small camera to his helmet. Now from up here, you can see how difficult this work really is. Spivey is up on a ladder in the middle of a forest, trying to lasso the tiny bodies of an endangered species. It takes longer this time. This is such a delicate procedure, but Spivey has patience and a gentle touch. What part of the bird are you trying to hook?
We try to get it around the body entirely. Yeah, of course you can't see, but you just do it very gently. And but these are just big enough that their eyes are open, and so they can sort of see what's happening.
Half an hour later, we have more chicks. He brings them down and begins banding those tiny legs. These chicks are 9 to 10 days old and not happy about being away from home. But those bands and the DNA tests will tell how far the birds roam and when or if they find a mate. Got to be careful to take records of each the way you
put the colors on. Absolutely, right. Yeah, we know there's no other birds banded with those color combinations within, certainly not in the Red Hills.
Wow.
It is the closest other population.
All of this is critical information necessary for their survival. They are so fragile, and the odds are stacked against them.
All right, they're ready to go back.
They will not have an easy life, in part because they depend on such a specialized habitat. They are the only North American woodpecker that drills out a nest in a living tree, and not just any tree. They usually insist on mature longleaf pines. Why is this habitat so important? Can't these woodpeckers live anyplace else?
Generally, red-cockaded woodpeckers are are habitat specialists.
What does that mean?
That means that they have a very specific habitat that they are required to have for them to have viable populations. And for red-cockaded woodpeckers, that is older, preferably longleaf pine. They will use loblolly and shortleaf pine forests, but it all has to have a general forest structure like this, where it's sort of a a grassy herbaceous understory.
No hardwoods around, I noticed.
Very few hardwood trees, and a very old pine canopy. A lot of these trees are 80 or 90 or 100 years old, and red-cockadeds generally will not use pines until they reach about this age, 90 or 100 years old, to build their cavities.
Longleaf pines used to dominate the southeast landscape. Today, less than 3 million acres remain. As this habitat began to shrink, so too did the number of red-cockaded woodpeckers. By 1970, they were listed as endangered. They look a lot like hairy or downy woodpeckers, but look at them side by side. Both hairies and downies have striped bars on their wings, but not across their backs. And their faces have black stripes as well. Now, look at the red-cockaded. Stripes across the entire back and a big white patch on the side of its face. I thought I had one coming to my feeder. Do a lot of people mistake them for other birds?
We get several calls a week, people asking about red-cockaded woodpeckers, and they say they have them in their backyards, and certainly we never say never, but it would be highly unlikely, unless your backyard looked like this.
No.
Would be unlikely that you would have red-cockadeds coming to feeders in your backyard.
So they're really that picky?
They are that picky.
One of the reasons they're so picky about these trees is that the trunk must be large enough for their nest. And older trees often have a fungus disease inside that makes it easier to drill out. The inside of these cavities can be huge, and they spend years pecking one out. It takes them so long to build a nest, young males will often wait for a parent to die so they can inherit the cavity. But with the help of biologists like Phil Spivey, there is at least hope they can survive. It's taken a lot of time, but the numbers of red-cockaded woodpeckers are increasing. It is hard to save a species in decline, but in southeast Georgia, there's evidence that it is possible. American alligators are a good example. Scientists say this species is more than 150 million years old. Indeed, the American alligator looks like it belongs in Jurassic Park. Even so, this icon of southern culture was almost hunted to the point of extinction. By 1967, the alligator population had dropped so low, it was listed as an endangered species. But once protected, alligators made an amazing recovery. In 1987, just 20 years later, they were doing so well, they were removed from the endangered species list. There is more good news in South Georgia. Hidden in the beauty of Reed Bingham State Park are some very special residents that some people feared we would never see again. The park is now home to at least 3 nesting pairs of bald eagles, and park rangers take great pride in showing them off.
Heads up, you guys, heads up. There's an eagle flying above.
There is good reason for the excitement. Bald eagles were on the brink of extinction in the 1950s. By 1963, there were only 417 nesting pairs left in the world. Why? Shortly after World War II, the pesticide DDT gained widespread use. That chemical washed into waterways and entered the tissue of fish. As eagles ate that contaminated fish, they began to have problems with reproduction, and their eggs became so thin they were crushed by the weight of a single nesting bird. Now recovered, eagles face more obvious issues. At the Auburn University Raptor Center, eagles that have clashed with civilization are now being nursed back to health.
There's a lot of habitat loss. They're having to learn how to adjust because of that. Most of them come in for trauma, either gunshot wounds. We still see a lot of birds that have been shot, but usually it's a fractured wing or a fractured leg due to an impact with a man-made object, cars, buildings, windows, things like that.
Bald eagles still face problems, but they have come a long, long way. Other species are not so lucky. Frogs and salamanders are among the oldest organisms on the planet, yet their numbers are dropping at an alarming rate.
These are a species of glass frog.
Atlanta Botanical Gardens amphibian specialist Robert Hill is part of a worldwide research effort to understand what's happening.
There's between 5,000 and 6,000 species of amphibians in the world, and a third to a half of them are in danger of, are in serious decline or in danger of becoming extinct within our lifetimes.
Habitat loss plays a major role, especially for the Georgia gopher frog, which has lost an estimated 97% of its range. But globally, the problem is complex, with many causes that range from disease to deforestation. And there are some other factors you may find surprising.
We have all manner of things to clean our water. However, there are certain things that they just don't clean. So human birth control, different anxiety and other mood stabilizing medications that get into the water that these animals may absorb, and in some cases, like they see with some salamanders and even some frogs now, whereas males basically become sterile because they're taking on like extra estrogen and things that they normally wouldn't in the water, and they basically breeding populations kind of fall apart. Obviously, if these animals are not able to produce sperm anymore, if you think about the levels of all of these chemicals getting in the water and hormones and everything, eventually at some point we won't either.
If for no other reason, understanding why a species is in decline may help protect us. There could be thousands of benefits in plants and animals that we have yet to discover. For example, snake venom is being studied as a way to combat deadly bacterial infections. Poisonous venom also appears to stop melanoma cells from growing. Consider, penicillin came from a lowly fungus, and the Pacific yew tree, once considered worthless, led to the discovery of Taxol, a leading cancer drug. And what about this guy, the indigo snake? If they disappear from Georgia, what difference does it really make? We got our answer to that question at the Mopani Preserve, located in the south-central part of the state between the small towns of Jacksonville and Lumber City. Researchers here are working to save this threatened species. Zoologist Dirk Stevenson says indigos are simply amazing.
Dirk, tell me about this snake. The color is beautiful. Is that where the name indigo comes from, indigo blue?
Yeah, exactly, Sharon. The common name indigo snake refers to the purplish black iridescent coloration of the snake.
Now, why is this such an important species to this part of Georgia?
The indigo is a remarkable snake, and it's an iconic, handsome snake. As you can see, it is the longest snake in North America. The record is over 8.5 feet. This is not a full-grown indigo male by any stretch of the imagination. They come much, much bigger. And it really captures the wilderness of southern Georgia. Places where indigos still occur tend to be very wild, vast, undisturbed habitats.
Granted, some people just don't like snakes. Well, all the more reason to love this guy. Indigos eat other snakes.
These guys are search and destroy, wide-ranging predators that are just awesome. They will eat virtually any vertebrate animal they can find, and they are not constrictors. When they eat other snakes and other prey, they capture the prey in their mouth and they chew savagely to kill it or to render it immobile, and then they swallow it.
Wow, so they swallow it whole?
Oh, sure. And they're known to commonly eat venomous snakes. They eat eastern diamondback rattlesnakes.
How do they do that?
Well, they find the snakes and they rapidly crawl up to their head and chew on their head and kill them, and then they swallow them head first.
Wow.
But they do a great, in the ecology of these habitats, they really put a herding on vipers and other venomous snakes.
The snake is only part of this story. To save the indigo, they must protect the land. This 1,000-acre preserve is part of a larger effort headed by Chris Jenkins. It's called Project Oriane.
I mean, without the habitat, we're not going to have indigo snakes. So for example, if this property continued to grow the way it is, these oak trees would turn into very large oak trees with the hanging Spanish moss, and it'd be kind of aesthetically, a nice place. But what would happen is it would eventually get choked out. The gopher tortoises would start to move out, and indigo snakes would no longer be here. So restoring the habitat is a critical part to saving the indigo.
As we take a tour of this land, the difficulty of the project becomes obvious. While indigos do need this sandy forest land, they do most of their hunting in marshy areas by the Okmulgee River. All of it must be preserved.
So this is a wide range that these snakes need. How many miles is that?
Well, that's a very good question. And so I like to think about indigo snakes as kind of the tigers of the snake world, if you will, meaning that they are this large, very mobile predator that's moving across a huge landscape looking for food. And there have been studies that have found that these animals will use over 1,000 acres in their home range within a year, which means this entire property that we're on, is smaller than the area that one individual indigo snake might use in a given year. So the challenges to conserving indigo snakes are great because it's such a big animal that covers such a large landscape. It has to cross roads and deal with all of these things that we as people have put on the landscape. So that is a big challenge to us. How do you conserve a large mobile predator in such a fragmented landscape?
Because of that fragmentation, most people never see an indigo unless they're in a tank at a place like Bear Hollow Wilderness Zoo in Athens. Zoo coordinator Berkeley Boone shares concerns about the future without indigos.
Crossing roads is another big danger to them. Habitat fragmentation because of those roads or because of subdivisions, golf courses coming in, and they're losing the places that they need to live. These guys have huge home ranges. Very active snakes, always on the move. You can see him flicking his tongue, he's smelling, he's actively looking at you with his eyes, he's checking everything out.
Is it tough on them because they blend in with the road?
They do look like pieces of busted tires on the side of the road, and unless you're actively looking for reptiles or amphibians crossing a road, or other animals for that matter, you probably won't even see them. And a lot of folks inadvertently run these guys over. Some people do it on purpose, but vehicles are a big cause of their demise.
Also, indigos were once heavily collected for the pet trade. Today, they are listed as a threatened species, and you must have a permit to own one. All the more reason that back at Mopani, researchers keep tabs on every snake they come across as part of the effort to preserve them in the wild. They also have to keep tabs on this guy, the gopher tortoise. This is the state reptile. Indigo snakes depend on the burrows gopher tortoises dig, and those burrows can be more than 40 feet deep. But the gopher tortoise is in trouble too. It has suffered an 80% decline in the past 100 years. And if the tortoise disappears, so too will the snake.
CJ, let's go to work. Come on, bud.
CJ, this chocolate lab, has been trained to pick up the scent of indigo snakes. It's a way to track the snake and more fully understand its habits. Almost immediately, he stops at the mouth of a huge tortoise burrow.
Yeah, good boy, CJ. Good boy, yeah.
We put a small camera at the end of a long scope in hopes of catching an indigo asleep in a burrow. On our first attempt, we found a tortoise. Indigo snakes are often behind the tortoise or in another part of the burrow, but we gave up on this hole. Soon, CJ picks up a new scent, and once more we begin the tedious process of trying to get a camera down a tortoise hole. This time it paid off. It's hard to see, but look in the right-hand corner of the screen, and there he is, an indigo, curled up and ready for a winter nap. It is a lot of work, but it's all part of saving a species. Who knows what secrets the indigo may hold? Studies about its iridescent skin may lead to new technology. It isn't bothered by poisonous venom, so could that feature be used in medicine? In the ongoing quest for new drugs to tackle emerging diseases, we simply don't know which of the thousands of plants and animals may hold a cure. From a tiny bird in Georgia to exotic creatures far away, all species have a role to play. In the words of John Muir, when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. We've learned that it's not enough to just save a species. We must also save the place it lives, the food it eats, and even the other species it depends on. I think it's safe to say none of us want to see the day when we have to go to a zoo to see the fabric of Georgia outdoors. I'm Sharon Collins. We'll see you next time. For more information about this show, check out our website at gpb.org/Georgia Outdoors.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible in part by a grant from the Imlay Foundation.